Hi there, I'm Vieno and this is my 10th video tutorial on D3. So we're starting to get familiar with the data binding aspects of D3. But up until this point we've done something like this. We've created a simple array and inserted some numbers into it, and then we've created visualizations based on this simple data. But in real life, this is rarely the case that you hard code your data into the on the HTML document. What you usually do is you fetch data externally or load external files, and what that means is I've prepared two files here, which are stored in the same folder, as you can see, as our index.html document that we're working on right here. And it's mydata.json and mydata.csv, and they actually contain the exact same data, which is the name and age of 3 different people. Now, if you're not familiar with these file formats, I suggest you just Google around. It's quite easy. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, I think. And yeah, in this case we have a simple array consisting of 3 objects with 2 properties each, the name and age. And the CSV file also contains 3 rows, one for each person, and we have a header row up here which contains the headers, the name of each value. So how do we fetch this data to our D3 visualization? Well, it's quite easy actually, and you can do this in a couple of different ways, but I'll show you my preferred way of doing this. So let's start with the JSON file. The way we load that data, first of all, you want to do this on a local server or a remote server, but in most browsers this won't work if you just if you're not running on some kind of server. But with that said, you simply use a built-in method of D3. You type d3.json, and obviously this is the name of the file format. So if you wanted to load the CSV file, you would do d3.csv. But we're working with the JSON file right now, and the first argument of this function is the path to our data file. And in this case, since they're stored in the same folder, we just type the name of the file, which is mydata.json. The second argument will be a function, and this is called a callback function. And what this means is that all the code in here, code blah blah blah, will be loaded once our data is loaded. So all code that depends on the data being available should be stored within this function right here. And we're storing the data in a variable, and that is that is this data, the thing we're calling data in here. That's our data. So we'll see how to reference that in a second. So let's start. I'm gonna type this kind of quick so we don't run out of time. From now on, it's kind of straightforward. We're doing the same thing we've been doing a couple of times by now. First of all, we create our container or our canvas, and let's give it some blah, blah. I can't type and speak at the same time. Just give it a width and height, and then we proceed to add our bars. So rectangle, and the data, as you can see, we're we're referencing the data variable that we define up here as an argument to our callback function. So we can call this whatever. I call this data, and then I just type name of the variable here. So this is where we specify where our data is coming from. And this in turn references the data stored in our file, which we specify in our first argument here. So the next thing is use the enter method, and we want to append a rectangle for each data element, and then we want to give it some properties. Width and height, we can let the height be 50, and y position will also be a function. And let's give it a fill of, say, blue. Now let's fill these out. The width will be a function. And just as before, we can just use the D argument here, which will reference our data, just as in the previous videos. So let's let the width be a function of the age. Now, since each data object or each JavaScript object in our JSON file has two properties, we actually need to define which of these properties we are referencing with this D variable. So the way we do that is real simple. We just type d.age. So that references the age property of our data elements. And let's multiply this by 10 so that the bars get a little bigger. And in here, the y property or attribute will be actually a function of the index. And we've seen how this worked before. We just return the index for each data element times 50 or whatever, and let's save and take a look at this. Okay, let's give them some space. We can just reduce the height with 2 pixels and refresh, and we have 3 nice bars here. Each represents the age of each person in our data, or my data.json file. So let's also add some text to each bar. The way we do that is nothing strange. We just repeat the procedure. Append text this time, and let's give it a fill, let's say white. Let me scroll down here, and since we want the text of each bar to be at the same position as the bar, so you can see what text belongs to each bar, we can actually just copy this, the attribute for the Y position or the vertical position for the text. And then we also want to specify what text we want it to have. So we let the text property be a function of our data, and we return this time d.name. Since let's say we wanted the name to be visible on each bar. So let's save this and refresh, and we can see that we have our names here, but they're not in the exact position that we want them to be, and that's because each name well, it begins at the top of each bar, so we actually want to move them down to the middle. And we know that each bar is 48 pixels in height, so we can just move them down, let's say 24 pixels. So let's save this and refresh. Nope. Oh, that was the wrong property. It's right here actually. 24, save and refresh, and we get some nice labels attached to each bar. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. But this is the way we'll work with data in the future, loading it externally. Yeah, and also this is really simple explaining this last part. What if we wanted to use a file that contains values in, data in this CSV format, which stands for comma separated values? We could actually just replace the JSON with the CSV like this, and save and refresh, and you can see that we get the exact same results. So it's actually really easy working with external data in D3. Yeah, okay, I'll see you in the next video.